Honestly, as much fun as it was to watch the offense, um, seeing the caliber that this defense has been playing over the course of the full year is really where I'm kind of the most excited about this team. And it's not that, the offensive production isn't, the super fun, sexy part of the game to watch. But going back to last year, we kind of knew who this offense was. We kind of knew that with Josh Allen and the weapons that he had, despite some of the highs and lows of the season, that they were at some point going to get it clicking together and hopefully be able to maintain that. And I think the bigger question going into this year was the defense. And, would we see the defense of 2 years ago or would we see last year's defense? And there wasn't, as much as there was changes with draft picks and whatnot, there wasn't really like wholesale changes to the personnel that we had last year. It was kind of just time on task and adding some pieces and just working together better as a unit. And granted, we haven't seen any real top flight quarterbacks for the most part since the Trey White injury. But the ability for the team to rally around that and the secondary in particular really looking like they haven't missed a beat without Trey there is just so impressive to me. I'm definitely a huge Trey White fan, and it's not that, when he went down with the injury, I thought the wheels were coming off, the season was over and whatnot. But I definitely thought there was going to be more of an adjustment, more variance into the defense without him there. And to the credit of the secondary, Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson in particular, they've really been able to step up and continue that very high-level defense, maintain the number one passing defense in the league. And like I said, with the addition of Taron Johnson, who's been more quietly playing out of his skin this year, I think we look at him last year and his game-changing pick sixes, and it's easy to kind of forget about him at times this year. But I think he's done such a underrated job this year, in my opinion. I think he's been stellar, and it's the type of player that you're either hearing their name because they made a great play or they didn't make a play, and you don't hear his name all that often. And I think it's just because he's doing such a great job of covering his receivers. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, another great game for both of them. That the Micah Hyde interception, 100%, I thought that was a touchdown. It looked like a beautiful pass right over the shoulder, and then just right at the last second, Micah Hyde swoops in and just steals that ball right away. That was one of the prettiest interceptions I've ever seen. Levi Wallace coming down with the interception on the little tip drill. And then the linebackers, Tremaine Edmonds, who is somebody that, if you listen to the show, I'm a little bit up and down on Tremaine Edmonds. I think it's a little bit unfair, but there are like the built-in expectations for me due to his draft stock and having a contract coming up. I think he's overall a pretty good player, but with his credentials coming into the team, I always expect a little bit more. But I thought Edmonds had a good game. I thought Milano had a good game, and then our defensive line stepping up, able to get Mac Jones down 3 times. But there was other pressures too, and it's something that we've seen kind of like the run game on the offensive side of the ball. As we've been moving through these last few weeks of the season, the pass rushes seem to come alive a little bit again. We got Boogie Basham coming in on the stat sheet with a sack. Starla Tulele had a really nice one, and then Jerry Hughes coming in with a sack too. And Jerry Hughes is somebody that I've talked about fairly recently, and just not exactly having the same production that we're used to seeing from Jerry Hughes. He's still getting after the pass rusher. He's still applying pressure. But Jerry Hughes is usually, at least every 2-3 games good for a pretty wild sack or a strip sack, something like that. And we haven't seen that a ton from him this year. But as I see that Jerry Hughes sack during this game, I start thinking back to the player that he's become in the last couple of years of the playoffs. And to me, he certainly seems like he really comes alive in the playoffs and becomes this whole different player. And I think that's great to have on this team, that veteran leadership. Some of these young guys. I thought Ed Oliver had a great game again. He's one that doesn't really pop off the stat sheet all the time, but he's really found himself in particular, like the second half of the season, and I think he's been pretty consistently playing out of his mind. And then definitely want to mention Harrison Phillips. Also not a guy that pops off the stat sheet, but he's somebody that really had a tough start to his career in Buffalo, be it injuries, missing an off season. There's a lot of curveballs in his career early, and it was starting to look like whether it was the injuries or who he was as a player or a combination of both. He was, to me, starting to look like we might have missed on that draft pick. And boy, he's been showing up in a big way, in particular over like the last 4 or 5 weeks, and to the point where I think he's kind of outplaying Star Lotulelei. And as I say that, Star Lotulelei comes away with the sack this year. So I guess it's kind of a good problem to have that the Bills they've really been investing in the trenches, and the defensive line in particular, wanting to have guys that have some possession flexibility and being able to rotate people in and out of the game so everybody's still staying fresh. And I would say a bit earlier in the year, I would say it was looking like a little bit of mixed results for me. But towards the end of the season, as the pass rush has kind of been coming alive again, I think that's really showing up. The one thing I did want to mention, and I got to give props to my guy Andrew for talking about this in the preview show. As we were doing the team breakdowns, and he was comparing the Bills' fourth down defense versus the Patriots' fourth down offense, and how much success the Patriots have on fourth down. They did go 4 for 4 on fourth down. That's a mouthful. They converted 4 of 4 fourth downs in this game, and it's kind of hard to poke too many holes into what the defense did. I mean, this wasn't the Jets team we were playing the week before where you held them to almost nothing. This is a playoff caliber Patriots team. I think they're still pretty early in the process, but their offense has been strong enough. Mac Jones has been strong enough to get them to this point. And really, at the end of the day, through the first half, you pretty much stopped them from doing anything that they wanted to do. And then you get into the second half of the game. Yeah, they end up with 17 points total. But you're also going into, more of a defensive game plan of, okay, well, let's make sure that we're really not allowing the big play. So I think the offense came alive a little bit in part to that. But even at that rate, you're still talking 232 yards from Mac Jones on 24 attempts, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The big one for me is seeing what the Patriots were able to do in the run game the first go around. And then looking at this game, cold weather game, expecting them to try to commit to the run. You held Damian Harris to 30 yards on 9 carries. Ramondre Stevenson had 27 yards on 8 carries. So, the strategy of getting out to an early lead and trying to make them one-dimensional and Darren Mac Jones to beat you, it was really able to be put into action by the Bills jumping off to an early lead and kind of get them away from their run game, and they were very effective in stopping the run when it did happen. I do think there was some plays left out there on the Patriots' part where you saw receivers that were coming open, and it was kind of the daring Mac Jones to go through his reads and find those receivers and be able to make all those throws. And personally, I think that was part of the defensive strategy was knowing that some of those things might pop up. But doing the daring Mac Jones to beat you part of it. And there were a few throws from him where he had a receiver running open and kind of duffs the ball into the ground and just a little bit of accuracy issues. Like I said, the defense was able to pressure him. They were able to cover on the back end. They were able to, throw some different looks at him to make him question what he was seeing. And the last thing I really want to talk about on the defensive side of the ball is actually more of a commentary on what the Patriots were trying to pull out here. When they went to the fake spike, and that one to me was kind of just like, there's some plays where, I'm just a dumb Bills football fan who does a podcast, but as I'm sitting here, I believe they still had 2 timeouts left, and I'm watching the game, and I see Mac Jones calling for the spike, and I'm like, I don't think they're going to spike the ball here. They still have 2 timeouts. Like, why would you let all this time run off the clock to waste it down spiking it when you have timeouts? And sure enough, it did look like it fooled part of the Bills' defense, but I believe that was Hughes just ripping right off the edge. He didn't even hesitate on that one. That was just a veteran play, and he wasn't stumped for a second. He knew exactly where they were going with that.